The schus of our learning should be a panacea and for Shlema, everyone that needs. Today we're going to start Pei Daled and Medalef at the Mishnah on the top. There's two Mishnayos, so we'll start at the top. The Mishnah says, Kol nechal b'shar gadol, yechal b'gdi arach. Anything that's considered food in a big ox is considered food also in a small kid, in a small goat. And what happens is, as the animal matures, so the bones, what used to be cartilage or whatever, a softer bone, is now becomes harder, tougher. It's not able to be eaten. So, what's considered food? So, if it's food in a big ox, that's also considered food in a small goat. Rashi's pshat in this is that what we're discussing here is if I have a bunch of people that want to register for a sacrifice, how much food do I actually have? So I can't count things that are now because the goat is young. I can only count in this, everyone needs a kazayas, only the things that would still be considered edible if it would be an old shar, an old ox. So I have actually less than what I think I have. I think I can serve all of this. Really, I can't really serve that. That's not really considered food. The Rambam learns a different pshat here. The Rambam learns that it's talking specifically about the bones that are not edible in an older ox. And the question is, what about in a younger ox where they are edible? Is that considered shviras etzem? The Rambam says yes. If in an older ox, it would be considered a bone and not edible, it would be considered a bone, even though right now it's something that I could eat. So it's still considered shviras etzem. The Raavad has another pshat in this Mishnah, and he learns that it has to do with nicer. What's considered nicer? Leftover, a sacrifice can't be left over till the morning. So, in this case, which food is considered leftover? Is it the bones, of course, are left over. So if it's not edible in a large animal, so then it's not considered nicer. Okay, let's follow Rashi. We're talking about food that's people can join in to register. Rashi can afayim v'hasachusim. Rashi can afayim means the edges of the ribs, maybe in the top or the bottom. Apparently, this would be more, it would be softer. And tzechusim is cartilage. So this is considered edible. That's the Mishnah. Rabba Rami. Rabba says, he supposes a contradiction to this. He says like this. The Mishnah says, Tanan, anything that's edible in a large ox is also considered food, edible. In a young goat, that means that if it's not edible in a large ox, then it's not food, even in a young goat. Let's read the end of the Mishnah. It says, Rashi kanafayim asachusim, says the edges of the ribs and the cartilage, that's considered edible. Now, 1 second. But you can't eat this from a large ox. So the Mishnah just contradicted itself. Rashi kanafayim asachusim, it says that's considered edible, but I guess Rabban knows that if you roast a large ox, you're not going to be able to eat those. Ela Tanaihi. Rabba says that our Mishnah, which looks so simple a minute ago, says it's actually a machlokes. Anything that's edible in a large ox is edible in the small one. If it's not edible in the large one, it's not edible in the small one. It's edible, but it's not considered food. And there are those that say that even these items which are not edible in a large ox, if it's roasted, but I'm adding in, but if you would boil it, it would be edible, even though in the way that you're roasting it now, it's not. But if you would boil it, it would be edible. So therefore, Yeshaimrim, that in a Gedi Rach, you're able to eat this even when it's roasted, it's considered food. Because there's a possibility of eating it in a Shara Gadol when it's boiled. So in a Gedi Rach, in a young kid, when you're young goat, when you're eating it, when you're roasting it, it's considered edible also. Okay, so Rabbah comes out of this whole thing with a machlokes. First opinion would say, I have to look at the way you're preparing it. Second opinion says, no, I don't have to look at the way you prepare it. I have other ways of preparing it where it would be edible, and it's considered edible now in the young goat. Rabbah says, Ma hein ktani. There's no machlokes here. The Mishnah says, now it gives the two items that it's referring to. It's not a machlokes. That's exactly the point of the Mishnah. Anything that's edible in a shara gadol. What are those things that are edible? It's the edges of the ribs and the cartilage. You have to, the one word that you have to add in for this to become clarified is you have to add in anything that's eaten with a big ox when it's boiled. So it's considered food in the Gedi Arach. It's eaten in the Gedi Arach when it's roasted. What are these? Rashi Kanafayim v'sachusim. This is the edges of the ribs and also the cartilage, which in a large ox would have been edible if it was boiled. Now that it's roasted, it wouldn't be, but a young kid is still edible even when it's roasted. Okay. Tanika v'seder Rava. We have a support for Rava. There's a brisa. Kalanechal b'shar gadol b'shalka yechal b'gdi arach b'tzli. Mahin Rashi Kanafayim v'sachusim v'giden arach and nidun k'basa. Okay, mamish the words of Rava, except for one more phrase that's added in. It says that anything that's eaten in a large ox, if it's boiled, so that could be eaten. That's considered food in a young goat when it's roasted. What is this referring to? Referring to the edges of the ribs and also the cartilage, and also the soft sinews are considered flesh. Yes, when it matures, it would get tougher. When it's younger, it's considered flesh. It's not so clear exactly what that last point means. Ibn Harachin. Let's see. Itmar. There's a statement which is of Amirayim, and it's usually Itmar is a machlokes. But it's always Amirayim. It's called a memra, a statement of Amirayim. Gidin shesayfen lahakshis. Sinews that as the animal matures will become hard and not edible. But when it's young, it's still edible. Rabbi Yechanan says that you can register for the Pesach based on the amount of food you have because you have these sinews that are edible right now. Rish Lakish says, no, you don't. You can't use these as part of the amount that you have because these, as the matures, are going to become tough and they're not actually food. So you can't count it now. Rabbi Yechanan says that you can count it. I don't look at the future. I'm eating it now. I look at it right now. It's edible. Rish Lakish says no. You look at what it's going to be in the future, and it's not considered food in the future. Not sure why you have to do that, but that's Rish Lakish's shita. Okay, I see where Rashi is coming from. Rashi is learning this Gemara that it has to do with registering, because the flow of the Gemara is about registering what's considered food. But it's not a hechref, because now we switched to Gidim. Before we were talking about bones. Which bones? The cartilage and the bones. That the Rambam could be saying. Well, the Gemara shifted a little bit. Okay. Isfei Rish Lakish to Rabbi Yochanan. Rish Lakish has a question to Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan's opinion is you look at the food as it is now. Right now it's edible. You look at these sinews, right now they're edible. Rish Lakish says that no, you look at it at the future. Rish Lakish asks, what are the things that are edible? He's learning like Rava. He's learning the Mishnah like Rava. The Mishnah says, it's as if the Mishnah is asking, what are those things that are edible in a large ox? I guess if it was cooked. Now you can have them in a gedi arach, in a young kid, roasted. What is that referring to? Rashi kanafayim v'sachusim, the edges of the ribs and also the cartilage. Haniyin, those yes. Abel gidin shesayfin lahakshis loy, but not gidin shesayfin lahakshis, but not the sinews that are going to harden, that are going to get tough. It's a problem. The Yochanan said sinews that are going to get tough is acceptable, but the Mishnah didn't have that in as one of the items. Now, the understanding of Rish Lakish in the Mishnah is that when it gave examples, it means only those examples and nothing else. So Amalei, Rabbi Yochanan responds that that's not the pshat in the Mishnah. Tana, Hani, v'hadin lahana. It gave an example, but it doesn't mean only those. When you give examples, you don't have to only be referring to those examples. That was an example. There's other things also. The same thing would apply to sinews, cartilage, and the edges of the ribs, and sinews would have also been. We didn't have to list every example. Hani my time. What's the reason for those? The cartilage, the masachli b'shar gadol b'shalka, because they're eaten in a shara gadol, in a big ox. If you boil it, hanach nami. These also masachli b'shar gadol b'shalka. These also would be eaten. The sinews would be eaten if you boil it. Okay, I have to take this word. I don't know which sinews are, and I don't know the way that they're prepared, and I don't know what they're going to taste like. But whatever the case is, Rabbi Yochanan says, look, it's the same thing. If you boil it, you can eat it, and so it's fine, even b'shar gadol. Amalei Rabbi Yirmiyah l'Rav Oven. Rabbi Yirmiyah says to Rav Oven, Ki azlis l'kamed Rav Avo. See, I thought Rabbi Yirmiyah was in Eretz Yisrael, but Rabbi Yirmiyah went to Eretz Yisrael later. So this must have been a question that he asked earlier. Unless Rabbi Avo was in a different city in Eretz Yisrael. But Rabbi Yirmiyah says to Rabbi Oven, which is probably Ravin, who was the traveler, Rabbi Oven, I believe it was Ravin. Like the Groth tells us that Rava was really Rabbi Ba. In the Yerushalmi, we see Rabbi Ba, whatever, Amar Rabbi Ba. So that's Rava, according to the Gra. He says it's what is it called? Compound, hyphenated. So okay. Ask him the following question. Rabbi Yirmiyah tells to Rabbi Oven. When you come to Rabbi Avo is a student of students of Rabbi Yochanan, maybe even Rabbi Yochanan himself. It says, "Mi Amar Rabbi Yochanan Gidin Shesayfin LaAkshis Nimna Malayim BePesach Alma Bastahash Dazlinan." Does Rabbi Yochanan really say that sinews that will eventually harden, toughen up, you're still allowed to register for them on the Pesach because right now they're soft. So that means I look at it the way it is in the present. I follow the present. But how can you say this? Rish Lakish asked Rabbi Yochanan a question. His question was, the skin of a calf. Now, usually the skin of the animal is turned into leather. However, the skin on the head of the calf is very soft. And when the animal is young, the calf, so then you could actually eat it. When it gets older, it becomes leather. It becomes the skin. It is the skin, but it becomes tough. So, what is going to be regarding tumah? Is it considered food? What is it considered? Does it have tumas eichlin? Tumas eichlin. If I turn something into leather, so then when it's ready to be whatever I'm using it for, then it becomes tummy. It has to be processed. Otherwise, it's raw material, doesn't become tummy. If I decide that I'm using it as a doormat, so then it's ready as a doormat. If I decide it's going to be a cushion cover or whatever, then as it is. But if I decide I'm going to make it into shoes, then it's not going to be tummy until it turns into shoes. So at the end of the process, that's when tumah comes about. But when it comes to food, food becomes tummy once it gets wet, right? So is this leather, not leather, is the skin of this egel arach considered food or not? That was a question that Reish Lakish asks Rabbi Yochanan. Now, the way he's going to answer that question is going to tell us, how do we look at food? Do we look at it as the way it is now, or do we look at it the way it's going to be in the future? He says it's not metama. 1 second. Right now it's edible. If you go basar hashta, which that's what Rabbi Yochanan wanted to do by the sinews, he says you don't look at that in the future. It's going to toughen. You look at it the way it is right now. Right now it's edible. So why doesn't he do that for the reish or hareish egel arach? Look at it as it is now. He doesn't do that. He says ein metam. It's not tummy. That means I don't look at it as food. Alma basar b'seifazling. You see, Rabbi Yochanan follows the way it's going to be, not what it is now. Okay, that's what Rabbi Yirmiyah says to Rav Avin to ask Rav Avo. Amar lei, Rav Avo responded, doesn't tell us that he went there and he asked him, but it leaves out that detail, but that's obviously what happened. Unless this is Ravin himself that's responding, but I don't think so. Amar lei, he says, maybe it's Ravin. The Ramalacha leichash lekimche. The one that asked you this, Rabbi Vo says to Ravin, the one that asked you this doesn't care about his flour. Now, there's a different shot in what that means. One shot is, it's like someone wrote a book and it was a lousy book. They said it's a waste of trees, to make the paper. So if leichash lekimche would mean that, look, he's eating in order to be able to have energy to study Torah. Obviously, he doesn't care about his flour because he's not studying well enough. So it's a waste of food on that. Rashi learned, the pshat over here is, leichash lekimche, is that he's not careful between the quality of this wheat. If there's psilus there, he just throws everything in. He's not careful with his. He's not careful with his learning. His example is he's not careful with his wheat. Why? Because Rabbi Yochanan legabi Reish Lakish. Rabbi Yochanan changed his mind. In other words, he didn't clarify all the details here, and that's why he was asking the question. It turned out that Rabbi Yochanan originally held that you look at food the way it is right now, and right now it's edible. But it turns out that Rabbi Yochanan himself switched, and he follows Reish Lakish that says you look at food the way it's going to be. Why? Rabbi Yochanan responded to Reish Lakish. He said, "Al takniteni shebelashin yachad ani sheinaisa." What happened was Rabbi Yochanan said, Rashi quotes this. Reish Lakish quoted a Mishnah to Rabbi Yochanan that says the following: their skin is like flesh. So how could you tell me that the skin of an egel is the skin of a young calf is considered to be not edible, because later on it's not going to be edible? We have a Mishnah that says the following are considered, the skin is considered flesh, and one of the items is the skin of a young calf. So Reish Lakish tells Rabbi Yochanan that I have a Mishnah that says basar hashta, that you look at it as it is now. Rabbi Yochanan responded, and he says, don't ask me about that Mishnah, because that Mishnah, I learned that it's just an individual that taught it. and no one else agrees with that. So Shabaloshin Yachid Anishaina. So I teach that Mishnah that it's a single opinion, and therefore I don't follow that. Which means that when we look back at our machlokes between Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish regarding sinews that in the end are going to harden, Rabbi Yochanan said, you look at it as it is now. That was because he had a different. He thought that he was going to follow that Mishnah, but it turns out that he doesn't follow that Mishnah because Reish Lakish asked him other questions, and he switches from that Mishnah. And now, really, Rabbi Yochanan himself holds Lubasai, that you look at it as it is in the future, and that the Gidim that are going to harden are not acceptable.
Isn't this kind of a different discussion? Because as you explained, Tuma, for a Kli, the same thing. You don't look at it right now, right? You only look at it, you're going to say, oh, it's going to become a Kli. Right.
What are you asking? By food? You're saying Benegir Tuma.
Yeah, so it wouldn't be the same thing? Like we don't in the future, right? So in general, for Tuma.
Right. When the answer to Tuma is different. Tuma. No, I think when I don't look at a Keli for the future, I don't think what I mean is I don't look at it because I'm going to finish. I can't say because I'm going to finish it, it's already as if it's finished. That I'm not going to say. But the fact is that this food right now is edible. In the end, it's not going to be edible. The question is this right now considered food? In other words, if I can figure out a way to make it food, would it be considered food? Something do I look at it that it's really not edible, but you figured out a trick to make it edible? Is it considered food? That's like really what's we're doing over here. You ate it quickly in a way that at that point it was still edible. So Rabbi Yochanan says no, it's not considered food. Yeah. So that's a very interesting question. We're going to learn in the next mission. Avram Nassan's asking about Nisa. If Nisa gets Malchus. Yeah, the Ravid learned to do it. Nisa. Yeah. So the Ravid learned this regarding Nisa. Question is, if you leave these items over, if they're going to become Nisa. That's the okay.
Have we learned that there's an issue with not eating all of the sheep? Once you take it home, you take the sheep home, and now you have to butcher it.
Yeah.
Right. Which I guess is why it's important. You have to know this is important for two reasons. First, to calculate the amount of meat you'll have to figure out how big your group can be.
Right.
And second, when you go home, I guess everyone's walking home with their sheep. Someone has to butcher it, unless the Kohanim did you a favor and chopped it up into filet mignon or whatever for you.
Uh-huh.
So
you have to take it home, and you have to finish everything.
You do have to finish everything.
Yeah, you're not allowed to leave over.
Okay.
What happens if you do? We'll see in the next mission. You have to finish everything. Okay. There's a machlekes regarding shiurim, if we use the volume or the weight. Ashkenazi poskim always follow the volume. I'm not sure if the Sfardim do the same. When you say a kazayas, does that mean the volume of an olive or the weight of an olive? We say it's the volume, which is 1 ounce. the ounce, the volume ounce. That was confusing. Okay, so it would be easier though to measure the weight. Actually, I don't know. It's probably the same thing. You see, you people are registering for this before it's prepared, so they had to know the ratio of how much bones there are to meat, and that they probably understood already before they started. Every sheep, they know how much meat you're going to get out of it based on how big it is. So, but what do you mean how big it is? So if you would weigh it, that would be easier to, or maybe they had a way of measuring it. So that's awesome. Okay, the Mishnah says, "A shaver es etzem bepesach hatar." Someone that breaks a bone on a kosher carbon pesach, you're not allowed to break the bones in it. So hareza like arbaim, you get malchus, 40 malchus, which means 39 lashes. Aval hamaiser batar, but if you leave over, instead of finishing all the food, you leave over. Can't leave anything on your plate. You did leave on your plate. Ba'ashever betame, or someone that breaks a bone from a carbon pesach that was tame, ain't like sarbaim, you don't get malchus. That doesn't mean it's permissible. That just means there's no malchus. There's no malchus for leaving over food. Bishlaima meiser betar, the Gemara explains, we understand someone that leaves over food. Why is there no malchus there? The Tanya leisasir menoad biker, ba'neiser menoad biker, ba'kasalit naseach leisasir leimershin like a divrab Yehuda. It says anyone that leaves over has to burn it. Beish tisarif, right? Don't leave over until morning, and what is left over till morning should be burnt. That's called the law of a nitik lesson. The Torah tells me how to rectify what you did when it was wrong, and so therefore, in those cases, you don't get malchus. You just have to rectify what you did wrong. Okay. Rabbi Yaakov says, that's not the explanation. That's not the reason for this. It's really a lav shem b'maisa. Don't leave over until morning. Now, you did leave over. You don't actively leave over. You leave over passively on Passover. You leave it over. So there's no action. If there's no action, then there's no malchus. Malchus is only similar to lav de chasima, it's called. That means don't muzzle don't muzzle an animal when it's threshing, which that's an act. That's something that's active. So therefore, malchus is only by that. We learn malchus from that lav, and if anything that's not perfectly similar to that, there's no malchus. So what do we need to be similar? It needs to be active. So machlekes Rabbi Yaakov and Rabbi Yehuda, what's the explanation for leaving over that there's no malchus? That doesn't tell me. If both of them agree that there's no malchus. But what about el shaver b'tamei minalan? But why is there no malchus by breaking a bone if it's tamei? I mean, whichever way you go with that, doesn't matter. It's an act. It's active. And it doesn't tell you what to, no, there's no rectification for that. So there should be malchus. Says the Amar Kra, he answers, the Gemara answers, don't break a bone in it. Okay, in it is an exclusion term, and so only in a carbon pesach that's tar you have this prohibition, not in one that's tamei. That's answer number one for why breaking a bone in a tamei carbon pesach doesn't incur malchus. Taner Rabbanan, we have a brisa that says "Vetzam le'sishbru boy." The brisa says, quotes the pasuk, "Don't break a bone in it, boy b'kosher v'lei b'pasel." Only if the sacrifice is kosher, not if it's invalid. Invalid would include if it's tamei. That's what we just learned. Rabbi says, read the whole pasuk. Pasuk says it's eaten in one house. That means it's eaten in a group. And don't break a bone in it. Don't break a bone in it. If it's eligible, if it's able to be eaten, so then you have the prohibition. If it's not able to be eaten, then there's no prohibition of breaking a bone in it. It's only those things that are edible. Because if you look at the beginning of the pasuk, it says you eat it in one house. That means we're talking about what's eaten, what could be eaten, that has the prohibition. What does that leave me with? It leaves me with an animal that's tamei is carbon pesach that's tamei. You don't have the prohibition of breaking the bone. Now, not allowed to, but there wouldn't be malchus there. Not allowed to because probably rabbinic. So now I have two reasons. I have two reasons why there's no malchus on breaking a bone of Korban Pesach that's tamei. Either because boy tells me bekosher v'loy bepasul, or because it's not edible. Two reasons. I have Rebbe's reason and I have the Tanakhama's reason. Now, my binayo, what's the difference between these two reasons? We're looking for a nafkamina. Nafkamina means what comes out from that? What would be a practical difference that comes out? Amar Rabbi Yirmiyah. Rabbi Yirmiyah gives us the first difference. We're going to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 differences, and each one is going to argue on the other one. We start with Rabbi Yirmiyah. Rabbi Yirmiyah says, Pesach haba b'tumah kebinayu. Let's say that Pesach, everyone was tamei, and nevertheless you brought the Korban Pesach, because the rule is that Tumah, the Korban Pesach pushes off Tumah. Tumah dechuya. Laman damar kosher, according to the opinion that says that it applies to any animal that's kosher, hai pasul. This was actually pasul. Now, this is a little bit of a stretch, it seems, but what we're doing is, at least the way it's explained here, is that really tumah dechuya b'tzibur. But the Torah tells me that you do it anyway. Really, it's tamei. Tumah dechuya b'tzibur means that you're doing a violation here, but the Torah says to do it anyway. You're supposed to do this violation. Now, it doesn't mean that you didn't do a violation. You did a violation, but you're supposed to do it. I don't know of examples of that, but in like American. So whatever the case is, I'm supposed to be doing this even though it's pasul. Okay, so the carbon's pasul, and now you're going to tell me that you're not allowed to break a bone. It says only in a carbon that's perfectly kosher. This is a carbon that's pasul. Lamanda maraya lachila, the one that says that it has to be fit for eating. Well, hainami raya lachilahu. This is fit for eating because you actually do eat it. Okay. It's a bit funny because I could flip it, sort of. I could have done the same thing the other way. I could have said, even though you're eating it, but I don't consider it royal achil. I don't know. I could play with this. Okay, that's Rabbi Yirmiyah's nafkamina. Rabbi Yosef says, Ki gavna. If you're talking about tumah, a carbon pesach tumah, the kuli alma mishum shvir setzim. Everyone holds that there's no prohibition of breaking a bone there. The Rebbe la kulikasi, there's the Bach takes that out. Bahai ha pasalu. This is for sure pasul. Even Rebbe that says that it has to do with royal achila, and you're going to tell me that Korban Pesach is royal achila because you're allowed to eat it. But Rebbe is saying that Rebbe is only being more lenient. Rebbe is never stricter. Rebbe is always being more lenient. That's the way if you read it from the text. The Bach takes that out. Everyone would agree that this is pasul. Rabbi Yosef says that what would be a difference between the Tanakhama and Rebbe if at one point it was kosher, but then it became pasul later. Laman damar kosher, according to the opinion that says that the prohibition is only in a kosher. So this had a point when it was kosher, and then at that point I had a prohibition not to break the bone. The prohibition doesn't go up. According to the opinion that says that it needs to be fit for eating, well, it's not fit for eating, so there's no prohibition. Only on the food, only if it's edible would I say, halachically edible, would I say that I can't break the bones. But here it's not halachically edible, so there's no prohibition. That's Rabbi Yosef's pshat in the machlokes. Abaya says, Kuli alma ki gav neim b'mishum shvir tzetzim. Everyone holds that in such a case, if right now it's not edible, everyone would say that there's no prohibition to break the bone. My time, what's the reason? Hashtam yasa pasalu. The fact is that it's pasul. So you're going to tell me, well, once it was kosher. But so what? Even the opinion that says boy bekosher v'lei bepasul would tell me that boy bekosher v'lei bepasul right now, and now it's pasul. So ela shvir setzim by daimikabinaya. Really, the difference between the Tanakam and Rebbe is: are you allowed to break a bone while it's still day and you can't eat it yet? L'mandam kosher, according to the opinion that says it's only by a kosher sacrifice, hakosher, the sacrifice is kosher. It is kosher. You don't eat it yet because it's not nightfall, but it's still kosher. L'mandam meraya la'achila, according to the opinion that says the only prohibition is when it's fit to be eaten, hashtalav barachila, but right now it's not fit to be eaten. Why? Because it's not the time yet. So if you broke a bone while it's still day, that was no prohibition. That would be the opinion of Rebbe. Tanakama would say, no, that is a prohibition. You get malchus because it's kosher. The only exception was if it's not kosher. This is a kosher sacrifice. Okay. Meisvei, we have a question on the opinion of Abaya. Abaya said that it has to do with if it's nightfall yet. That would be the difference between Tanakama and Rebbe. Rebbe Yomi nimnan al mayach shabareish nimnan al mayach shabakulas. Marrow. Can I register people for the marrow of the bones? How do you get to the marrow? You have to break a bone. You can't break a bone. So Rebbe says that the marrow that's in the brain, that's in the skull, that you can get to through the nose, and you're able to get that out, and you can actually someone can register for that kazayas that's there. Maybe it's one of the kazayas. However, there is another bone, the kulas, which is the thigh, that you can't get the marrow out of it unless you break it. So that you can't register for that. What's the reason why Rebbe allows you to register for the marrow of the brain? Because you can extract it. Now you can scrape it out with a stick. You can stick it through the nostril and scrape it out. But if, according to Abaya, it's a very interesting question. According to Abaya, that the whole prohibition is only, according to Rebbe, it's only when it's edible halachically. That would only be after nightfall. But so what? Cut it open before nightfall and take the marrow out and register for that. Break it open while it's still day and let someone register for that piece. If Abaya is correct. Abaya is correct that the whole prohibition is only at a time when it's being eaten, but not beforehand. So then why does Rebbe say you can't register for the marrow that's in the kulas? Amalach Abaya. Abaya says, according to you, to your logic, the truth is, I can take a hot coal. I could put it at the edge of the bone, and it will burn its way through, and I'll be able to extract some of the marrow. So what are you telling me? That according to me, that I say that there's no prohibition by day, and therefore you should be allowed to, even according to you, there's no prohibition to take a coal and get it out. And still Rebbe said that you're not allowed to do that. And still Rebbe said that not that you're not allowed. Still Rebbe said that you can't register someone for that meat that you can extract by using a coal to burn its way through the bone. Tanya, because we're starting a brisa. Burning the bones or cutting sinews are not considered breaking bones. Sinews aren't bones, and burning bones isn't breaking. So really, Abaya is saying that you have another way of getting it out, and forget about my idea of how you can get it out. But nevertheless, Rebbe says that. So what's the reason why Rebbe says that you can't do that and expect to register someone on that bone, on the marrow for that that you're going to get out through burning it? Why didn't he say that? Mishum Paka. because we don't want to suggest that you take hot coal and burn the way through it, and because it may crack when you're doing that. That's the case. So we also don't want you to register for that bone because you may crack it open at the wrong time. So we have other concerns there. That's the issue. That's what Abaye is saying. Abaye is saying that we actually have other concerns. In other words, don't say that if you're going to accept my opinion that says that there's no prohibition of breaking the bone by day, automatically then you could get registered on every piece, on all the marrow that's inside the bones, because we have other concerns there. Ravam mishum hefset kachim the kamasle beyadayim dilma achel nura mimayach bidei mibaydei gzer mibaydei matmishach hashecha. Rava says there's another issue. When I take the coal and I burn my way through the bone to be able to extract the marrow that's inside, I may end up burning some of the marrow. No, you would. Abaye was suggesting that Rebbe says that you can't register for those bones that are solid. So Abaye is suggesting, why don't they take a coal and burn it way through and get the marrow? It doesn't have to mean before. It could be that night. That night they could someone registered, and that night they'll take a coal and open it up. Now Abaye himself held that theoretically, if they would break it open by day, it would also be acceptable. Not with a coal, just actually breaking it with a knife. That's only at the time of eating, which is at night. Abaye says you can break it by day. Oh, I don't know if the roasting whole is ma'akev. That's how you roast it, but I don't know if it's ma'akev. I don't know if it affects the. No, but let's say it fell apart. Can we still roast it? Yeah. So, I guess that would be a minor detail of that roasting it whole. That in order to get this bone out, to get the marrow out, we would say let's yeah. Anyway, Rava comes up with something very interesting. It's a little odd. He says that we have a concern. You may end up destroying some of the marrow. So therefore, we don't want you to do that. The reason why this is a little odd is because, what is he recommending? He's recommending don't do anything to it. Now, if you don't do anything to it, then it's for sure hefset kachim, because you can't eat it, you can't get it out, you can't break the bone, you can't do anything. You're worried about burning a little bit. But if you're burning a little bit, that saves the rest of the marrow that's inside. If you don't do anything, you lose the whole thing because you can't get to it, you can't break the bone, and it's totally hefset. He says, no, don't burn it. The explanation is that he doesn't want you to do hefset kachim biyadayim. Actually go ahead, actively destroy kachim. Because if it gets destroyed, then look, that wasn't our doing. That wasn't our doing. I mean, even though it's inevitable, but still, you didn't do it. So that was more acceptable to Rava than to actually go ahead and do it and actually destroy some of it. Okay. That was all explaining Abaye's explanation. We got a little distracted over here. Abaye says that the machlekes Tanakam, the nafkamina between the Tanakam and Rebbe would be if you break a bone by day. Rav Papa Merkolki Gavna, Rav Papa is a student of Abaye and Rava. He says, if that's the case, then everyone would agree. By day, everyone would hold that you're not allowed to break the bone by day. My time. What do you mean? Even the opinion that says royal achila, this is royal achila. I mean, I have to wait till after Kiddush. It doesn't mean until Kiddush it's not food. It's food. You just have to wait till the time to eat it, which is this evening. It's not considered that it's not royal achila. Is that right? Rav Papa suggests that the machlekes would be, the nafkamina would come out, the difference would come out between Tanakama and Rebbe is a bone that stuck out. That stuck out. Now, when I read this the first time, I thought that maybe we're talking about Dr. Stein's Ben Pakua, but I realized Korban Pesach is only a male. It's impossible. Yeah. So what does it mean sticking out? So Rashi tells us it's talking about where the arm or the leg was sticking out of the wall of Yerushalayim. It went out after it was shechted, of course, and maybe there's a lot of pushing and this and that, and he ended up at the gate of Yerushalayim, and one piece of it stuck out of the wall of Yerushalayim. That means it went chutz l'klayim. It went out of the area, of the restricted area where the sacrifice is allowed to be. If it goes out from there, it becomes puzzle. So mandam or kosher, according to the opinion that says kosher, hakosheru. We're talking about the inside part, the part that didn't go out, is still kosher. Mandam arayla achila, the one that says that it's fit for eating, I love barachilo, but it's not fit for eating. You're allowed to break a bone, according to this opinion, on some part of the animal that's not fit for eating. So, Kedetanya was taught in the Bryce, Rabbi Shmuel ben Eishel, Rabbi Yechim ben Breika, Eivish Yatzim Miktasi v'Shavru, Ein by Mishum Shvir Setzim. Rabbi Yochanan ben Breika, Rabbi Shmuel, the son of Rabbi Yochanan ben Breika, says clearly that if a limb was sticking out, so there's no problem of breaking the bone there. Why? Because that's not Royal Achila, that limb. Now, this is like the cup is half full or half empty. According to the opinion that says kosher, we say, well, half of the meat is kosher, so you can't break the bone there. If you do, that's a violation. According to the opinion that says that fit for eating, if you want to break the bone, so at that point, everything that's out was not fit for eating, so you break the bone. Yeah, I'm not sure why it has to be like that. Maybe you could say it the other way also. According to the one that says kosher, you say, well, this is not kosher. According to the one that says fit for eating, I'll say, well, the part that's inside is still fit for eating. I'm not sure why it has to be like this. Yeah, Taisus is asking, Tema, am I chashav le kosher tvemi barachila? The part, Taisus asks this. It says, why does it have to be just this way? The part that you're not allowed to eat is also not kosher. Okay. Rav Sheshes Breder Ravidi Amar, he says, oh, there's going to be no problem of breaking that bone in this case. Because the bone, the limb that stuck out, is considered puzzle. That was hard for me to figure out. I couldn't get that word. Binah. The prefix base, it was added onto it. Na means raw, or not cooked enough. So that's what we're talking about. Mandam or kosher. According to the opinion that says kosher, well, it's kosher. You have to roast it. Mandam rei lachila, the one that says fit for eating, that's where you have a problem breaking the bone. Hashdein rei lachila. Well, it's not fit for eating because you didn't roast it yet. That would be the machlekes. Rav Nachman Yitzchak Amar Kolti Agavni Yishbei Mishum Shvir Setzim. He argues with Rav Sheshes Breder Ravidi. He says that everyone would agree that even when it's raw, you're not allowed to break the bone. Why? My time. That's not considered not fit for eating. You roast it and you'll be able to eat it. It's still fit for eating. It's not unfit. It's fit. It's you just have to roast it. If you break the tailbone, now the tail was put on the usually the fats are put on the altar. Usually the fat doesn't have a bone. In this instance, the fat has a bone because it's part of the tail. The fat tail of a sheep has a bone in it. So Lamandam kosher, according to the opinion that says kosher, you're not allowed to break a bone in any sacrifice that's kosher. Kosher, well, this is a kosher sacrifice. Lamandam lachila. It's not fit for eating. Why? The al yaligavaya salka, because you put it up on the altar. Is there prohibition of breaking bones on part of the sacrifice that's not eaten, that's put on the altar? So Rebbe would hold no. Rebbe says the whole prohibition is only on things that are roy lachila. Ravashi Amar Kolkai Gav Navada Yim B'Mishum Shvius Etzem Navada Yin Roy Lachila Klav. Ravashi says no. Everyone would agree with that. That's not roy lachila. That's not considered what's considered the prohibition of breaking the bone. Ravashi says the whole prohibition of breaking a bone is only on a part of the animal that has food. If there's no meat on that bone, so then there's no prohibition to break it. But if I say that it's a sacrifice that's kosher, well, that's kosher. But according to the opinion that says royal achila, which is Rebbe, and then you need to have enough food there that it should be considered royal achila, and you don't have. So it's not enough food. It's because it's not the right size. So it's not even considered. It's just not there. Ravina Markolki Agavna Lesbe Mishum Shvir Setzim. He says, oh, you don't have a kazayas on the bone. There's no problem to break a bone like that. The bein and shir achila. Of course you need an amount of food there, according to Rebbe. The difference is even according to both opinions, you need to have food. What's the machlekes Rebbe and the Tanakama is if I have on this bone I have a kazayas, just not all in the same place. Lamandam kosher, according to the opinion, it says kosher. Well, kosher, it's kosher. According to the one that says Rayla Achila, it's only on the spot of the bone that has a shir achila there. That spot of the bone needs to have a kazayas on it. That's where I'm going to have the prohibition. Yeah, I wonder if the explanation for why I'm not allowed to break a bone is all dependent now on this. I always was thinking that you break the bone to get to the inside. It looks like you're poor, and we're trying to show by the Pesach that we're redeemed and we're rich. We don't have to do that. But then why would it have to be only on this place of where the food is? Anyway, it's a limit from the pasuk. The pasuk says, that it's eaten in this house. Don't break a bone. It has to be a place where it's eaten. I mean, it's on the bone that needs to have food. So he's learning it from a pasuk. Just the question is, then how does the logic of the mitzvah, of the prohibition, come out in the details? Okay. Tanya ka'arba minayu. I think we said we had 8 explanations here. 8. We have a brisa that supports 4 of them. It goes like this. A very interesting brisa because the Tanya was starting brisa. Rebbe Yomi starts with Rebbe. Now Rebbe was one of the opinions here, so he's going to tell me his opinion. Now, if he tells me his opinion, that's going to tell me probably that the other opinion disagrees. So that would tell me that we're the nafkamina sa. It goes like this. Rebbe Yomi, b'bayis echad yeyachal v'etzem le'sishbru by. In one house you eat it, you don't break a bone in it. Al hakosheru chayav eina chayav al apostle. Only if it's kosher, but not if it's puzzle. If it had at one time it was kosher, but then it became puzzle. When you're breaking it, there's no prohibition of breaking a bone. That was Rabbi Yosef's statement. Because when you're at the time of eating, it was already puzzle. There's no prohibition there. Yesh by shir achila, yesh by mishum shvir setzim. If it has a kazayas on it, then there's a prohibition of breaking the bone. If there's no kazayas there, then there's no. Who said that? Either Ravina or Ravashi, depending on if it needs to be in the same place or not. only what's fit to be eaten, but not what goes on the mizbeach. What goes on the mizbeach, you're allowed to break the bone. That was Reb Nachman Bar Yitzchak. Reb Nachman Bar Yitzchak told us that the fat of the tail was not a problem. The tail, b'shas achila yesh by mishum achila, yesh by mishum shvius etzem, shlei b'shas achila yesh by mishum shvius etzem. At the time of eating, there's the problem, but not at the time of eating, there's no problem. Who said that? That was Abaya. Abaya said the difference was only the difference between them was by day or by night. By night, everyone agreed you can't break it, but by day, that would be a machlekes. And therefore, Rebbe that says that it's not Raya Lachila because by day, there's no problem. Okay, Itmar. Let's go a little further. Let's say it doesn't have a kazayas in the same place, but there is a kazayas on the bone, just at the other end. And you're breaking it on a spot that there's no kazayas. But what was a discussion before in Ravina is now a machlekes Rabbi Yechon and Rish Lakish. Is there a prohibition to break a bone like this, where the kazayas is not on the spot that you're breaking it? Esri Rabbi Yechon and Rish Lakish. Rish Lakish said there was no problem, and Rabbi Yechon asked Rish Lakish the following question. It says, "Ve'etzem leisish b'rabay, echad etzem sheish bei alav kazayas basar, ve'echad etzem shein alav kazayas basar." I have a brisa. Whether there's a kazayas on it or whether there's not a kazayas, there's a prohibition. Ma yein alav kazayas basar. What does it mean that there's no kazayas on it? If you say that there's no kazayas at all, why is there a prohibition? We said that only if there's food there. Rabbi says the pshat in the brisa must be that there is a kazayas, but it's just not right here. And the brisa says it doesn't matter. It's still prohibited. What does Rish Lakish do with that? Rish Lakish said, "Oh, you don't have the kazayas right here surrounding that break, then it's not a problem." So 1 second, the brisa says that it is a problem. So Amarle, he responds, we're on top of Pehei, Hachi Katloi. That's not the pshat. Hachi Kamer, this is what it means. Echad etzem sheish lav kazayas basar mibachutz, v'echad etzem shein lav kazayas basar mibachutz, v'yesh lav kazayas basar mibifnim, b'makam shvira. Rish Lakish says, the pshat in that brisa is not that there's it's this bone, a steak, whatever, has a bone that's going through it. It's not that the part of the bone that you're breaking doesn't have the kazayas. Talking about that over there, Rish Lakish says that would be no problem, no prohibition. We're talking about that if there's no kazayas on the outside, but when you break it open, there's a kazayas on the inside. That's what the brisa meant. Whether the kazayas is on the outside or whether it's on the inside, whether it has a kazayas or not, that meant it doesn't have it on the outside, but it has it on the inside. That's a prohibition. Vahatanya. This Vahatanya, Rashi tells us, is benichusa. You read it straight because the word vaha could mean this or but. Usually Vahatanya, but we learned in a brisa, we have a question. Not in this case. In this case, it's Vahatanya, and this is what we learned in the brisa. Doesn't matter if there's marrow inside. You're still not allowed to break the bone. What does it say? What is it referring to? It says that you eat the flesh on this night. That's talking about the flesh that's on the bone. What about the marrow that's inside? Tough luck. Can't get to it. It's in the bone. Oh, maybe not. Maybe if there's marrow in the bone, you have to open the bone to get to this is a carbon Pesach. You can't just leave it like that. You have to open it up and get inside. You have to eat every piece. I have a pasuk that says, don't break the bones. Oh, that pasuk. That's talking about bones that don't have marrow. Suggesting, maybe. But a bone that has marrow, you have to get inside and you have to open it. It says, and don't be shocked by this. Why? I have a positive command, eat the carbon Pesach. I have a negative command, don't break bones. Positive overrides the negative and break the bone to get the marrow out. So I have another source that says, don't break the bone. Repeats it by the Pesach Sheni. And it doesn't need to do that. Why? That you're supposed to do it exactly like the first one with all the laws of the first sacrifice. All the laws includes don't break the bone. Why do you have to go ahead and specify the law again? Don't break a bone. You already said like all the laws. It's coming to tell me I'm not allowed to break a bone, even on a bone that has marrow inside. I'm still not allowed to break it. So Rish Lakish is saying, you see, the kazayas basar could be inside as well. Because the bone that has marrow, I'm still not allowed to break. Meisvei, the Gemara has a question. Interesting. That's an interesting question. There is a concept called there's a concept called achshavei, that if something is very chashav, and even if it's not a shear, it becomes like a shear. Achshavei, it's considered like something significant. Yeah, I don't know the answer. I don't know it. Probably the fact that it says achila means that I need a shear. That's what we're looking for. Don't tell me that this is a special part of the animal or something. No, but it's not the thing. We're saying that you only make the bond, not connected to because I'm saying whether it is connected to the matter, whether the matter says not, no, there's still this nothing why great length you can get to it. It's an interesting point. Interesting point. Okay, Meisrei, the Gemara has a question. Half the limb sticks out. You have to cut off the meat of the part that sticks out. And then you peel off the rest of it, the rest of the meat that didn't go out. Then you cut off that whole bone at the joint, at the interesting question. If it's true, according to Rish Lakish, that if there's no kazayas in this spot, the spot that you're breaking it, then there's no prohibition of breaking it there. So why, when a bone is sticking partially out, why does he have to do this difficult process of peeling off the bone, peeling off the meat off the bone until the part that stuck out, and then you cut that off. Then you peel off the other part, and then you cut it at the joint. Why do you have to do that? Why can't you just peel off the meat just in a circle right around the spot that you want to break? There will be no kazayas on that spot, and then you just cut it right through. Okay. Abaya Amar Mishum Paka, Ravina Amar Bekulas. Abaya says we're afraid that it may, if you're going to cut it, we're going to allow you to cut the bone in this instance. It may end up cracking in a way that it's going to break even at the spot that has the kazayas. If cutting through, it could end up split, and it cracks at the wrong spot. That's going to be a problem. Rava says no. That Brisa was talking about the kulas. The kulas has marrow inside. It's not going to help for you to peel off all the meat on the outside because you have the marrow on the inside. It's not going to help. So that's why you have to cut it off at the joint, not over there. Okay, let's leave the Gemara right here by tonight.